Speaking at the University of Toronto Socialist Fightback Club, and to discuss should the NDP dump Mulcair. I assume a lot of people in the room will have made their mind up, but maybe some of you haven't. Whether it should be yes, whether it should be no, whether it should be you're still waiting to hear more information. Well, this meeting is being sort of organised by Fightback, and we have a definite perspective on the NDP, and it's not a new perspective. We've held it ever since we've been organising, that the NDP needs to adopt socialist policies, otherwise it's going to fail. And sadly, this is what happened in the 2015 election. And this, unfortunately, wasn't a surprise to us, and we actually predicted this at the last federal NDP convention in 2013. And this is, the decisions made at the 2013 NDP convention really led the NDP down this path to the sad defeat, the sad decimation of its MPs in the last federal election. What happened in 2013? Well, the apparatus at the top of the party decided that the way to win was to moderate. And the way, what was holding the party back was all this idea that it was too radical, too associated with socialism and social ownership, and what you needed was a moderate, pragmatic party. And the big debate in 2013 was about whether the NDP should remove socialism and social ownership and eradication of poverty from the NDP constitution. And sadly that vote went through, although Fightback and other socialists were at the forefront of trying to stop that amendment to a more wishy-washy constitution. But the powers that be, the establishment, the party establishment, convinced themselves that this was the way to victory. And this is how they ran the election campaign. Ironically, in the sort of period just before the election, the NDP was number one in the polls. Number one in the polls precisely because it had put forward some policies that people, working class people, young people, saw would make change in their lives. Good things like $15 minimum wage, $15 an hour childcare, subsequently the pharmacare program, opposition to Canada's war in Syria, and opposition to the so-called anti-terrorism legislation, which would give unprecedented powers to CSIS. At the same time as the Liberals were supporting the Harper Conservatives on this. The Liberals were taking a right-wing view, the NDP appeared to take a left-wing view, and the NDP was number one in the polls. But with the drop of the writ, with election day, everything switched. Everything switched, and Mulcair took, I think he'd be criticised for doing a front-runner campaign, a risk-averse campaign. Well, the fact is, if what he was doing was an austerity campaign, and was attacked for that by the Liberals. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and say the Liberals are left-wing. They're not. It's utter smoke and mirrors. It's an utter con of what Justin Trudeau said he stands for. The Liberals are the party of Bay Street throughout. They are deemed the natural governing party of Canada. In other words, they're the preferred party of Canadian capitalism. The largest cuts in the history of Canada were done not by Conservatives, but by the Liberal government of the 1990s. Massive cuts, massive austerity in that period. So the Liberals have no credibility on this. But they have this great trick known as campaigning left and governing right. And amazingly, the NDP allowed them to do this again. And the NDP and Mulcair's strategists convinced him to run primarily on balanced budgets. Balanced budgets. And not just any balanced budgets, balanced Stephen Harper budgets, which was based upon $65 oil. And he completely ignored the fact that oil went down to $35. And it's now, and we're utterly crushed by the Liberals, who run on a platform of deficits in order to spend on infrastructure. Now, again, the Liberals, their numbers are completely out of whack. They promised a $10 billion surplus, and in fact, they posted a $30 billion surplus in the last budget. All that does is delay austerity, and there's going to be austerity down the road, but after they have to pay off all that debt. But that austerity is going to be down the road under the Liberals. If Mulcair had won the election on the basis of balanced budgets, you'd have a situation of either an NDP government putting through massive austerity, or going back on all its promises, or both, which would be an utter disaster for the NDP, would lead to utter delusion by everybody who voted for the NDP. But we're not in that situation of an NDP federal government putting through austerity. In fact, we're in the situation of asking ourselves, why did the NDP lose? Now, if you would believe the stuff coming out of the NDP federal office, well, why did the NDP lose the election? Well, because it was for the courageous stand in defense of Muslim women's right to wear the niqab. This is an inconvenient explanation. First of all, the Liberals had exactly the same policy, and yet they gained seats in Quebec. And secondly, think about what actually is meant by saying this. It's saying the NDP lost the election because the working class is too racist. It's blaming the electorate. Like, we're good, but they're all a bunch of racists. It's not a way to win people over, really, and it doesn't stand up to any credible examination. The second one is the don't worry, be happy story of shouldn't worry, it's the second best result in NDP history. And strangely enough, this didn't actually go down very well with many people, and it's also seen as fantasy land, that going from vying for government to losing more than half your seats, every seat in the Maritimes, most of the seats in Quebec, every seat in Toronto, and saying, no, it's great, it's the second best ever. It's actually even not really the second best ever, because previous parliaments were smaller, so proportionately it's not the second best ever. But even that is not satisfying to me. And now you're getting this growing backlash amongst the rank and file. Oh, let me add, so this is sort of the story from NDP federal office. While Mulcair was basically nowhere to be seen for about 3 months. The first time we saw him was dancing to Hotline Bling, which is obviously what the rank and file of the NDP wanted to hear. Maybe Jack did, but it's your fault for liking drag. So I guess that's to appeal to the Toronto audience. And then it's been going back and forward. It's been going back and forward, sort of like trying to see if the whole niqab and don't worry, be happy story would stick. It hasn't. And lately, interestingly, you've seen a turn to the left by Tom Mulcair. And I find this quite amazing, that the chameleon powers of this man is quite amazing. That here we have a Quebec cabinet minister, Quebec Liberal cabinet minister, who a career politician, who the opinion of his colleagues in the Liberal Party was that he was actually more on the right of the party than on the left. And that there was quotes of him praising Margaret Thatcher as a wind of liberty and freedom. And all right, so this was, 10, 15 years ago, whenever this quote was, anybody can change their mind, right? But when he was approached with this on the campaign trail, essentially didn't deny it, didn't say he changed his mind, didn't do anything like that, and essentially said, well, this bolsters our economic credentials, that we will be sound, we will be reliable with the public purse. Really? Really? So that's going to enthuse people. That's going to enthuse the NDP base. It's going to enthuse young people who are looking for change. And this is where it really comes down to it, is whether, anyway, so yeah, this Tom Mulcair, who just a few months ago said that was okay with positively quoting Margaret Thatcher, now he's feeling the burn, fighting back against the 1%. It's just not credible. It's just not credible, and it speaks of desperation. It speaks of extreme desperation. And so what the NDP needs, in the opinion of Fightback, cannot be achieved by Tom Mulcair. And you can tell that, like, the interesting thing is that the left-wing things that Mulcair has recently been saying, well, normally the right-wing press would come down on them like a ton of bricks. They would say, it'd be Comrade Tom this, and, Commissar Mulcair that, and all of the vitriol of the right-wing media. But we're not seeing that. We are seeing precisely the opposite. All of the right-wing press, the Globe and Mail, National Post, Sun Media, Canada's equivalent of Fox News. Sun Media wrote 3 editorials supporting Tom Mulcair. Not 1, not 2, but 3. Why? Because he's the best man to keep the nutty, quote, far left socialists at bay. That's why they're supporting Tom Mulcair. That they want a safe NDP, an NDP that will not threaten the establishment. An establishment that feels quite threatened these days. We just had the release of the Panama Papers, that while working class people and young people are getting screwed by this system, the rich are hiding their money, not paying taxes, not playing by the rules. A poor person, a worker, if you don't pay your taxes, if you break the smallest of rules, if you get 10% more than the miserly welfare rates or the EI rates, the employment insurance rates, then they'll come down on you. They'll hunt you down. They'll demand that money. They'll charge you punitive interest, everything. But if you're the rich, if you're the 1%, well, then you can hide it away. The rules don't apply for you. And that makes people damn angry. And it's not, and that's a global phenomenon. It's an utterly global phenomenon. In fact, to a certain degree, Canada is slightly delayed relative to the degree of anger and radicalization in other countries. But it's just getting time to catch up, just catching up. But the fact is that people are mad as hell at the inequities of the system. And more than anybody else, it's the young people who are mad as hell. And it's easy to explain. Well, if you're under the age of, if you're 21 or under, which seems like a lot of people in the audience are of that age group, well, you haven't known anything except austerity. Your entire, the whole of your teens, your whole life when you really could listen and think about the news and politics, it's just been economic crisis, cuts, and austerity. And that changes consciousness. This idea that the elections are won in the middle ground and moving to the centre. Actually, I don't agree with that whole thing about moving to the centre, because where is the centre of the planet? Now, people might argue it's Toronto, but there is no centre of the planet, and any idea can be presented as the middle ground between two extremes. Right? So there is no centre to politics. Liberalism is not the centre of politics. It's just the status quo. That's not the centre. That's the status quo. Who's happy with the status quo? Pretty much nobody. Everybody hates the status quo. Status quo means unemployment, war, environmental disaster, wage cuts, pollution, all the rest of it, high tuition, no jobs, no hope. Welcome to status quo. I wouldn't call that the centre. And people are looking for radical solutions, more and more radical solutions. In fact, there's recently been a number of very shocking polls, which for some reason the Canadian polling industry hasn't deemed worthy to ask the Canadian population, especially Canadian young people. But I can't see a reason why the young people in the United States are more radical than Canada. I think, generally speaking, people like to think of Canada as more left-wing than the United States, which I know we'll have to see if somebody actually does the polling, we'll see what the results are. But a poll of American 18 to 26-year-olds, in response to the question, which type of political system is the most compassionate, 58% said socialism, 9% said communism, and just 33% chose capitalism. 66% of the polls responded said corporate America embodies everything that is wrong with America. This is the United States of America. This is the land of McCarthyism and the Red Scare and motherhood and apple pie and all the rest of it. And the fact is that young people are looking for a socialist solution. This is what explains Bernie Sanders. Like, Bernie Sanders didn't make people socialists. People were already socialists, and they were looking for someone like Bernie Sanders. And in Britain, you've had the rise of Jeremy Corbyn, who came from nowhere to be the leader of the British Labour Party. From being, the Labour Party went from being Blairite, the most hawkish pro-war party you could imagine, to overnight revolt, put in a socialist against nuclear weapons, for renationalisation of the railways, for free education, open socialist, leader of the Labour Party. After we're all told there is no alternative to moving rightwards, there is no alternative to capitalism, to quote Margaret Thatcher, Tom Mulcair's favourite person. So this is what the NDP needs. This is what the NDP needs. And the NDP needs to adopt a socialist program. The NDP to mobilise young people who are sick of the status quo, utterly sick of the status quo. And the argument is always, well, that's all well and good, but you'll never win elections that way. Well, the reality is they're not winning elections the other way either. So, and actually, I think it would win elections. I think. Well, that's not the reason in itself. You shouldn't just be, what's the point of winning government if you're just going to do the same as the other guy? Right? If you're just going to continue the inequities of the Liberals and the Conservatives, what's the freaking point? The point is to make change that makes a real difference for young people, for working people. But even if it wouldn't win elections, it would be worthwhile. But it can, precisely because people are looking for radical change. And in fact, the Liberals realise this. The Liberals are far better opportunists, right? And ironically, the leadership of the NDP were far worse dogmatists. They were stuck into a dogmatic Blairite ideology that, moderation means victory. They were stuck in, but despite the fact it led to defeat in BC, defeat in Nova Scotia, defeat in the Winnipeg mayoral election, defeat in the Toronto mayoral election, defeat after defeat after defeat after defeat. Actually, in Ontario, the defeat in Ontario, where the NDP did a right-wing campaign, was defeated by a fake left campaign of the Liberals. And that just happened 2 years ago, and it was exactly the same on the federal level. How they didn't see this is anyone's guess. You know, I don't know what they pay these people, but it's way too much if it's more than the money I've got in my pocket, right? Which is, I think, like $2, $1, right? So it's crazy, crazy. And the Liberals saw this. Trudeau saw this. You know, we all know how smart Justin Trudeau is. But yeah, he said when the NDP ran the balanced budget that's the election right there. That they understood they were going to siphon off all of the NDP votes, and so the NDP vote hemorrhaged. It was just under 20% of the election, and now it's close to 10%. It's all people who consider themselves New Democrats. 2/3 of people who consider themselves New Democrats are voting, or said they would vote Liberal now. Right? So, given, what do you consider yourself? You know, if, in terms of a political ideology and the Conservative, NDP, Liberal, say New Democrat, who would you vote in the next election? Justin Trudeau. Amazing, amazing. That's where the present leadership of the NDP has brought us to. And so this cannot continue. Well, it can, sadly. It can. The delegates in Edmonton are going to decide this, and I don't know which way the vote is going to go. Like a week ago, it looked like it was all going to be sewn up. You had the leaders of 5 major trade unions. Actually, the way it was, here's the interesting thing about the media. When a trade unionist gets up and says we need better wages and conditions for workers, the media comes in, Labour boss wants to raise your taxes so that for greedy, lazy workers. But when a trade unionist gets up and says we should support a right-wing NDP leader, they suddenly are treated very respectfully. They are laboured leaders that should be respected and listened to. Right? It's amazing how the media frames these things. They're no longer a boss. They're no longer something to be vilified. They're respected statespeople. Right? And the fact is, there was respected statespeople in those unions have no democratic mandate from their rank and file. They never asked anybody in the rank and file for this. So when they say these unions are supporting people, no, 5 union bureaucrats are supporting people. Right? Oh, but then, interestingly, Sid Ryan, former head of the Ontario Federation of Labour, and now Hassan Youssef, the head of the CLC, they've come out against Mulcair, to their credit, and for renewal in the NDP references Sanders and Corbyn. But they do that, now they're bosses, and they only represent themselves. That's interesting. That's interesting. So you can see the media, the corporate media is not neutral in all of this. They have a very specific perspective because they're afraid of the movement around Sanders and they're afraid of the movement around Jeremy Corbyn. And they'd rather have a safe, pliant NDP that doesn't unsettle the system, that there's an establishment of the NDP that supports the establishment in society. That's what they want. That's what they want. But we are facing an epoch of austerity. In fact, there have been people predicting 50 years of secular stagnation and austerity, when it goes from tepid growth, 1 or 2%, which barely keeps up with population growth, and then interspersed with periods of slump and crisis. Right? So we had the global economic slump in 2008, 2009. We've been in boom since 2009. Can you feel the good times? No, nobody can. Because the growth has been so tepid that nobody notices that. But now it appears that we're on the brink of another new slump, led by China, led by the European Union. And whereas Canada did a little bit better than other capitalist economies in 2008, 2009, largely due to selling oil and other commodities to China, and the fact that there wasn't as much of a housing bubble back in 2008, due to pure accident, pure luck. But now, Canada has the worst housing bubble on the planet. The average price for a detached home in Toronto is 1.2 million. In Vancouver, it's 1.3 million. This is insane. This is insane. And when that bubble bursts, there's going to be really bad repercussions. Family debt, 165% of family income. Economic slump, people lose their jobs, can't pay their mortgages, can't pay their credit card bills, massive bankruptcies. Things can go down very, very quickly. And then you throw on top of that the low price of oil, which is set to be low for a reasonable period. There's no prospect of the price of oil going up back up to the $100 level that it used to be at. And it's around $35, $40 oil. That is a drain. It actually put Canada in technical recession for two quarters last year. That makes the Canadian economy very weak, very susceptible to the global slump. So this means that people are looking for an alternative to capitalism, and calling things what they are. This is a capitalist crisis. And the best ideas against capitalism, the only ones that really have been stood up to the test of time, is socialism. Now, calling yourself a socialist doesn't lose votes, it gains votes. Bernie Sanders is getting so much support because he calls himself a socialist. Jeremy Corbyn got so much support because he called himself a socialist. And that's what we need. We need a socialist NDP. We need to stand up for socialist policies. Full employment, free education, free public transit, pharmacare now, not in 8 years. Childcare now, not in 8 years or more, which is what the NDP was putting forward. Oh yes, and I guess another argument for the sort of voting for that Mulcair did put forward a progressive platform. So yeah, progressive platform, like for any parent, that is currently expecting children, well, their kids will be practically in university before there's an NDP childcare plan in place. It's like delayed, 8 years, 12 years, 16 years, etc. You never know when it's going to be implemented. So people deserve things now. People need things now, and will mobilize behind a movement for that now. So the NDP stands at a crossroads. We don't know, the vote, it's Wednesday today, the vote happens Sunday. What's going to happen? I don't know. But there's a developing momentum into developing opposition, definitely. The NDP youth wing just came out in saying that there needs to be new leadership. Many of the, I think it was the McGill and Concordia and Brock youth clubs said there should be new leadership. I think Niagara Labour Council said that there new leadership. Fightback members who are delegates to the Toronto Labour Council are putting forward a resolution calling for new leadership. Let's see if that goes through. I think it'll be voted on tomorrow. And there's and we've seen people like Sherry DeNovo, Sid Ryan, Peggy Nash, who was a leadership contender. She recently penned an editorial, said that the election was a disaster, that Mulcair didn't listen, that we should look to Bernie Sanders. But sadly, she ended it by saying, and I still haven't made my mind up on the leadership, which just doesn't make any sense. But the rest of, 90% of the article was okay, and the ending was a bit disappointing. But the irony is, she ran for the leadership, and she ran an incredibly wishy-washy campaign for leadership, didn't really say anything. But if she said things along the content of that article, she could be very well have been Prime Minister today, right? So, but the fact is she didn't say anything, and therefore people with all the leadership candidates, except Nikki Ashton, pretty much not saying much during the NDP leadership election. They didn't say much, and therefore people voted for Mulcair because he seemed like the best politician, the most capable politician. But what people want is ideas. They want ideas. They want real change, something measurable, something very clear and clean: socialism, free education, nationalisation, workers' control, stuff like that people can mobilise behind. So hopefully on Sunday, enough of that momentum will be expressed in the rank of our delegates. Unfortunately, it's quite expensive to get to Edmonton. If they were held in Toronto, I'm fairly certain that Mulcair would be toast, because the Toronto NDP are not happy people. It seems like the Quebec NDP are not happy with Mulcair. Yeah, and that's in his home province. And we'll see how things are out west, and whether the union leaders, bosses, whatever you want to call them, depending on what your media stance is that day, will mobilise a lot of delegates to pack the room. We'll see what happens. But it's not much of a mandate, really, if he does win on that basis, because a lot of these unions were supporting strategic voting in the election. They were saying, I'll vote for whoever between the Liberals and the NDP who will defeat the Conservatives. So that's not really much of a mandate. And if he continues, either it's going to lead to a period of civil war in the NDP, or a period of extreme disillusionment, with the party going down to 10%. I wouldn't be even surprised if the party went down to 5% of the polls, which the Toronto Star and Toronto Sun would be very happy to see the NDP at 5% of the polls. What we need is an NDP that is campaigning not just electorally, but on the streets, mobilising people. That NDP MPs should be the people's tribune. They should be the voice of the oppressed, taking up the issues of the oppressed and denouncing the establishment, denouncing the status quo, and mobilising people and giving them confidence that mass struggle can make a difference. And you can combine that inside and outside Parliament. I don't agree in parliamentary cretinism, but I don't believe in anti-parliamentary cretinism either. But you can unite the two. But at the end of the day, we need to fight for socialism